Okay, good morning all. We might ask this that a bit like Ryanair, that you have your seats, and we will bring our proceedings to order for this morning. Good morning again. My name is Kevin McKenna. I have the honour of serving as one of the board members of the Faculty of Nursing and Midwifery with the Rcsi, and it is my honour to welcome you this morning on behalf of Sigma's 6th biannual European Regional Conference. So welcome back to those that joined us yesterday, and I hope, like myself, you enjoyed the gracious hospitality like only the Rcsi can do last evening, and welcome to those that are just joining us this morning. We'll just ask that you take a moment to identify the fire exit that's proximal to yourself, and just to note that we're not expecting any fire alarms or fire drills. I've been asked to mention for people to put their phones on silent, although I am assured that you should feel perfectly free to tweet as the proceedings continue. So it is now a great pleasure for me to welcome Professor Daniel Oerther. I had the pleasure of meeting Dan just this morning for some minutes, and we decided between us that we would invoke his honorary Irishness with a first name of Danny and a second name of Oerther. So there has to be an O in it somewhere. But indeed, this is the correct pronunciation of his name. So Dan, as he prefers to be known, is a licensed professional engineer. He received his PhD from the University of Cincinnati. He is currently a professor of engineering with the Missouri University of Science and Technology, and he has served as a senior scientific advisor to the US Secretary of State. He's an extremely accomplished scholar and practitioner, and has numerous professional and honorary awards, not least of which, of course, is his lifetime honorary membership of Sigma. So in our brief minutes this morning, we realised that Dan has a kindred spiritness with ourselves as nurses and midwives, having spent his life's work synthesising his scholarship and research and education and practice in the service of advancing the health and well-being of our shared humanity. I also noted last night of the strong, I was mindful of the strong tradition from Nightingale of correcting the environmental conditions that the human might progress their own recovery. So, and in that tradition, the title of Dan's presentation this morning is Converging Nursing and Engineering to Care for Human Health and Planetary Welfare. So I will ask you now to join me in welcoming Professor Dan.
I'm going to make sure I don't fall. So, all right, let's get started. I know it's early morning. Who is this on the screen? Go ahead, shout it out. Florence. All right, Florence. All right. Who's this? John something. John Snow. John Snow. Physician. Took the handle off the pump, right? All right, who's this? No. Ah, good guess. Edwin Chadwick, a barrister who rewrote the Poor Laws, who is a strong advocate of Nightingale, who developed the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health in the UK, which provides food inspection. Make sure we don't die from allergies in our food. Make sure we don't die from infectious disease in our food. For bonus points, who's this? Bazalgette, he's the engineer that built the Thames embankment. Without it, London would have died from fecal matter. Now, if we look at these, and you look at the mask that I'm wearing, you think, why in the world would Dan come out dressed like this? This is a period known as the Great Sanitary Awakening. So when you, as nurses, talk about Nightingale, and we talk today about partnerships, there's nothing new here. Nightingale was already a partner with barristers, physicians, engineers. We're not discovering something new. We're actually revisiting a time 150 years ago when we already solved serious problems. And so you might think, okay, well, Dan's wearing this garb, and I'm going to take it off because it's pretty hot. It's pretty hot. But that 150 years ago, this would have been considered some state of the art. I mean, we look at it now and we think this is ridiculous. What's it? Yeah. We look at it now and we would think this is ridiculous, but in fact, it wouldn't have been. In fact, Hippocrates encouraged people to dress like this, thought of it as something that people should do. So the idea of the plague doctor is not some ancient, weird, old concept. It's actually pretty new and recent. Now, why do I bring things like this up? Because, well, here's where we're at. All these folks were studying miasma, they were studying a problem, and they didn't understand it. The 5F diagram, which the WHO put out in the 1950s, which we know is based on understanding Pasteur and Koch, is the germ theory, right? Don't eat where you defecate. It's pretty simple. Don't eat where you defecate. Here's the problem. We're so in love with our understanding of evidence-based healthcare and things like the 5F diagram, we botched COVID because of this. We thought that if you just got 6 feet apart, nobody would get sick. Nonsense. It's aerosol. It's not fomite transmitted. You know who saves people from COVID? Engineers. There's a reason why there's a carbon dioxide meter on the outside of this hall. It's to let you know that the air in here is being recycled sufficiently that you're not breathing the filth from other people. Miasma was a wrong notion that resulted in the right kind of activity. Miasma was the wrong understanding that resulted in the right kind of activity. Building sewers to remove smell in response to miasma was the right solution to the wrong problem. And I like this set of cartoons that come from the New Yorker. There's all kinds of things, right? Recycle to make trash cans jealous. Of course recycle is the right thing to do. To make trash cans jealous? That just sounds silly. Building sewers to get rid of the smell of people's farts? That just sounds silly. But yet that's what we did. King Solomon. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Nurses, I am here to tell you your idea of partnerships and sustainability is nothing new under the sun. The Great Sanitary Awakening from 150 years ago was already a partnership in sustainability. People were dying from their own filth. And nurses and physicians and barristers and engineers came together to solve that problem. Now we've got problems today. We need the basic science to understand it. We need the practitioners to implement it. That's the challenge we're faced with. So if we look back at miasma theory, if we look back to the 5F diagram, would we have thought about that as something that we were curious about, question mark, or we thought about that as something we knew for certain, exclamation point? How many of you seen the poor polar bear that's, you know, on is that real? Or is that the plague doctor? 150 years from now, they will look back at the things we talk about today and laugh. We've got to have the humility to understand that. We've got to have the fortitude to move forward. I would argue that's being bold. I would argue that's what Sigma's all about. This picture of a nurse, is that really that different than the plague doctor? So let's think about where we're at and where we're going and how we work together to get there. Converging nursing and engineering to care for human welfare and planetary health. If you like to look at people's slides, mine are all on Twitter. Some of you say, yeah, don't do Twitter because it gets me distracted. It's okay, it's a microblog. You can actually just go to Twitter and look, and my slides are pinned right to the top of my profile. So if you like any of these slides, you want to use them, feel free. They're all there as JPEGs. Go for it. You want PowerPoints of it? No problem. Let me know. Happy to share them with you. But if you go to Twitter, all 600 slides that I'm going to talk about today, for the next 3 hours, they're pinned there. I'm going to define I-shaped, T-shaped, and V-shaped professions. I'm going to recognize distinctive traits shared between nurses and engineers. I'm going to critique the work of pioneers, guides, and translators. And I'm going to describe how we develop support systems to help this work in a transdisciplinary worldview. The U.S. National Science Foundation defines convergence research with 2 pillars. Deep integration across disciplines. Transdisciplinary is not interdisciplinary. Right? Just like transsexual is not bisexual. I'm doing interdisciplinary research. I'm doing multidisciplinary research. I'm doing transdisciplinary research. When we think about what do we mean by transdisciplinary? We mean that I get deep into the language of some other discipline. I understand it. We create new things. We create new understanding. Driven by a specific and compelling problem, I can't think of a bigger problem than the death of our planet at our hands. You want a specific, compelling problem? There it is. So it is long past time for us to work together to solve these problems. What do we mean by a vanishing point? For those of you that are artists, I apologize because I'm going to probably describe this and butcher it, right? But if you want a two-dimensional to look three-dimensional, you draw lines that would be parallel in the foreground but converge in the distance. And that makes things look like there's 3 dimensions. See, nursing and engineering are parallel lines. We do the same kinds of things, and we don't mix. But aren't we both interested in a common future? What would it look like if we pointed our parallel lines towards that common future? What if the vanishing point is the Sustainable Development Goals? That's a very different view for how we are as disciplines. And the reason we need to do this is because we're living in the Anthropocene. It's neat we talk climate change. That doesn't really matter. Climate change is a trivial thing. The Anthropocene is the epoch in which human activity is the dominant force on this planet. We're worried about, well, I don't want to take a transatlantic flight because there's climate change associated with the greenhouse gas of my plane. Nonsense. There was more meat on your plate for breakfast. You've got 6 pairs of shoes. You're killing the last rare species out there. We're destroying rainforests like it's nothing so that we can grow soybeans. Because Lord help us if India ever starts eating serious amounts of meat, we're all hosed. It doesn't matter how many electric cars the West drives. The Anthropocene is the central challenge the Earth faces. Climate change is a piece of it. That's why I love the Be Bold conservation. It's not just climate change for the sea, it's conservation. It's all of it. All of the above. I-shaped. We all understand this, right? You drill down deep. You get your bachelor's or your associate's degree, you get your master's degree, you get your PhD, you know more and more nursing. You're a stronger and stronger gatekeeper of the profession. You tell people they can't be part of it because you know it better than they do, right? We all understand that. And then we say, well, no, wait a second, because wouldn't it be nice if the nurses and the physicians and the social workers, wouldn't it be nice if they worked at the bedside? Oh, right idea. Interprofessional education. Let's be T-shaped. Let's have different disciplines, have some drill down deep, and have others work side by side. It makes a T, right? We say, wow, that's advancement. That's creative, and I don't disagree with that. That is advancement and creative. I did this paper with Bev Malone. Many of you in the UK would know Bev, right? She was former CEO for Rcsi, right? So, I mean, Americans have been allowed to come over here occasionally in the past with some modest success at times, right? So I'm here to say, well, here's some thoughts that we came up with, right? So opportunities for interprofessional exploration between nurses and engineers. Turns out engineering 75% male, nursing's 95% female. You wonder why men don't come into nursing? Because you don't look like engineering. I've been to talks, well, how do we get more men in nursing? Maybe we should explain that it's caring. Which part of caring do you think we do in engineering? You want to get more men in nursing? Make it look more like engineering. You want to get more women in engineering? Make it look more like nursing. We actually do the same thing. I think it's atrocious that we don't call nursing a STEM discipline. Absolutely ridiculous. Obviously, nurses know math and science. They design technology. They use it. But here's an important quote that I like from this paper. In our opinion, the power of convergence, where deep interdisciplinary collaboration is used to solve a pressing societal challenge, fundamentally includes the need to prevent the lessening of profession-specific. Rather than indiscriminate blurring between the disciplines, we encourage the formation of T-shapes. So Bev and I thought, you know, T-shape, let's have them interact. And then my wife happens to be a nurse, so she actually improved my understanding. So we can, you know, you can even get better than Bev Malone. You can talk to Sarah Oerther. So if you're looking for somebody else to talk to, and she and I came up with this idea of V-shape. What would it look like if we bend professions towards each other? What about when we converge them? Be a nurse. I'll be an engineer. Don't we care about a common future? Let's point our professions towards that future. So let's recognize some of these shared and distinctive traits among our professions. Nursing. Now, some of you are going to say, yeah, Dan, stethoscope and lamp, and I don't like those metaphors. Well, I don't like bridges and slide rules, so, you know, deal with it. We've got some things up here to get our concepts, right? So what does it mean when an engineer is thinking about nursing? Empathy and assessment is what I think about knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Contrasted with math and models. Tacit knowledge, nursing intuition, compared with engineering tools. The focus often on the patient, the focus on the public. See, I save lives too. I'm a healthcare provider. I just do it millions at a time. You all brushed your teeth this morning. Hopefully nobody in here gets diarrhea later today. That was me. I did that. What have you done today? We did that for 2 billion people today. What have you done? That's engineering. The purpose of nursing. And some of you might disagree, but I would argue that one of the purposes of nursing is to bend yourself to your patient through empathy. There is a bending that occurs. There's a bending that occurs in engineering. We bend the future to our design. We create the world that everybody lives in. So we're already working towards bending. We're already doing V-shape. What does nursing produce? Amazing theories and practice. What does engineering produce? Some things. So how do we take some things and how do we take some theories and practice and how do we bring those together? It's a Venn diagram. There's things where we overlap and there's things where we're unique. The nurse engineer works with comfort at the interface of the I-shaped discipline of nursing and the I-shaped discipline of engineering. The nurse engineer is at peace, working with the disquiet of the latent variable, the thing that one knows must be true, but cannot be evaluated directly. It can only be studied from inference of its impact. The nurse engineer captures the known known in a model, describes the perceived but not yet known, also known as the known unknown, in a theory, and accounts for the true unknown in stochastic terms or using conservative safety factors. The nurse engineer moves effortlessly between the abstraction of mathematics and the full presence of empathy, because the convergence of the disciplines of nursing and engineering in a single professional means that the abstract and the fully present coexist simultaneously for the purpose of generating a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. Sounds very nursey. I can learn as an engineer how to write nursey sounding stuff, right? I mean, I think I'm getting there. But we're not exactly the same. You're oranges and we're grapes. Right? All nursing is nursing. Now, I just realized yesterday I'm in Ireland where not all nursing is nursing, so I apologize to those Irish nurses who are trying to keep the mobility requirements from the EU from creeping over and messing up your nursing degree programs. But my understanding of nursing is that you enter nursing to be a nurse, and then you might practice in some sub-areas. An orange is an orange. Each part of an orange is an orange. Not so with grapes. Yes, it's a bunch of grapes, but each grape might be more sweet, more sour, more spoiled. It won't be that way inside an orange. Electrical engineers are no more civil engineers than one grape is another grape. There's similarities, but there's also uniquenesses between these professions. So there is a role for pioneers, guides, and translators. Pioneers are professionals who lead the creation of a new V-shaped discipline. Guides are educators who move between existing I-shaped and T-shaped activities and help emerge the V-shape. And translators are educators with the lingua franca of the new V-shaped discipline, whatever that is. So I'm going to give you some examples from my own work that I would argue is somebody trying to be V-shaped. These are kids in Guatemala. This is a picture from the New York Times. On the left, or this is ABC News actually. On the left, that's what Guatemalan kids look like in Guatemala when they're 9 years old. They're stunted. They're not short, they're stunted. Short is just I'm not tall. I got proper nutrition, I just happen to be genetically short. Stunted is I never got proper nutrition. You take those same Guatemalan kids and instead they grow up in the United States, and this is what they look like at 9 years old. Guatemalan people aren't short, they're stunted. Particularly those living in the mountains. Particularly those that have been, the victims of a variety of different crimes that have kept them from living to their potential. They grow up to be short of stature adults. Their IQs are between 5 and 7 points lower. Their earnings are lower across their whole lifetime. It's a poverty trap. 200 million people across this world are stunted. It's a horrible poverty trap. You want to work on something big? Join me. Help me solve stunting. There's a big issue. 200 million kids growing up stunted. To be stunted adults, to have less earning potential, to have their own stunted children. What causes this? Their gut, leaky gut, environmental enteric dysfunction. Normal healthy gut, you put food in your mouth, it goes into your body, right? I always tell my engineering students, this is not the inside of your body. We're a donut. This is a special hole. It goes from here down to here. It's the outside. It's not the inside. It's got to go across. I don't care how much peanut butter you feed little kids that have EED. That's not the solution. Shoving more food in their mouth. You got to get nutrition in their body. So if their intestines are messed up and they can't get nutrition into their body, putting food in their mouth isn't the solution. You understand where I'm coming from? I mean, this is serious, difficult stuff. So we went to Guatemala. We did some 16S ribosomal RNA work. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, this is a way of looking at the bacteria signature, right? Think bacteria, what are they? They're like mitochondria in our bodies. They have ribosomes in them. You can study the ribosomal RNA to identify who they are. And so this is a principal component analysis for some ribosomal RNA work. And here's what we found. Kids that weren't stunted, that didn't have aflatoxin in their food supply, all had a very similar gut. Kids that were stunted and were exposed to aflatoxin were dysbiotic. So there's no question there is a unique bacterial signature for healthy. And if you don't have it, you're not healthy. What's going on? They drink dirty water, so you can go in and engineer water filters to help them. They eat dirty corn. Why would you eat dirty corn? What does that have to do with planetary health? Turns out El Nino and La Nina change the way the corn dries in the field. When corn dries incorrectly, it grows aspergillus. Aspergillus produces aflatoxin. At a high enough dose, bad for your liver. And a low dose, bad for your gut. Okay, well just tell those Guatemalan people to dry their corn differently. Wait! Their religious practices, sun worship and corn and... Okay, so we've stomped on them as, colonists for a century or more, so let's just tell them they're doing their corn wrong. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, well, let's just have them, I know you're poor, I know you want to feed your child, just don't eat the dirty corn. Well, that's just ridiculous. They're hungry. Okay, well, Dan, what does this have to do with climate change? El Nino and La Nina influence climate change. This problem with aflatoxin is getting worse, not better. So when we have our 6th pair of shoes and take our transatlantic flight and eat our blood sausage for breakfast, you're contributing to this. This is the relationship between stunted children and our consumptive lifestyle. So how do we solve something complicated like this? Well, I've proposed kind of a conceptual model of convergence research. That involves community-based participatory research and interprofessional education and doing things like structured reviews and interviews and data analytics, and I plug all that into structural equation models, and many nurses, I'm sure, know structural equation models. You can run them two ways. You can run them either to explore information, or you can run them to confirm information. It's linear regression in a neat graphical form so that you can interact with your data well, right? It's a great tool. It's no different than an Excel spreadsheet. It's just got a nice user interface. It's a great tool for asking questions. So if you've never looked at structural equation modeling and you're into kind of like the quantitative tools, I'd encourage you to look it up. So it's a great tool, particularly for looking at things that we call latent variables. So here's an example of a picture from an SEM on the right, and then we'll talk about the words on the left. So latent variables are those things that we know are there, right, but we can't measure directly. For example, education. What do we mean that somebody's educated? Well, obviously, it's the opposite of not educated. I mean, how many people in here have a PhD? Are you educated? I heard last night there's somebody in here with 2 PhDs. They clearly have us totally crushed. I sat next to a lovely young lady last night that was very proud that her only PhD was an honorary PhD because she said she likes to practice. You know her as the former president of ICN. I knew her as my dinner companion last night, and I only found out at the end that's who I was sitting next to. We had a great conversation. Would you say Miss Kennedy's not educated? Of course not. So what do we mean by education? So when we go to Guatemala, we say, well, how many years of education did your dad get? How many years of education did your mom get? Do you speak Spanish at home? It's Guatemala. Of course they speak Spanish, right? No, you colonists, they don't. The colonists speak Spanish. They speak a Mayan dialect. That's what they speak in Guatemala. You don't learn Spanish to go work in South America. You learn Spanish to go be a colonist in South America. So how much Spanish do they speak in a Mayan home is a good sign of how much education they've had because they've been taught a second language, something different than what they spoke in their home. So we go and we measure these kind of things and we map them to a variable like diarrhea. How much diarrhea do they have? And we measure this and we come up with some examples of what's going on with stunted. If water was dirty, kids got diarrhea. Great, Dan, you didn't need millions of dollars to tell us that. If kids wash their hands, if their parents were educated, or if households were wealthy, then the water filters would have operated properly. That's useful to know. If the filters were operated correctly, or the parents were educated, then kids didn't get diarrhea. So all of those, like please donate for water projects to build a water filter, are no better than all those projects help educate people. There's no difference between the two. Because educated parents would operate a filter properly, but if they were educated, they know to do things like wash their hands. So they cut down on diarrhea through a whole variety of mechanisms, not just the water filter. But multivariate approaches remain the most important. In other words, having some money makes sense. Having some education makes sense. Having a water filter you operate properly makes sense. And all of those things help your kids not get diarrhea, which helps them not be stunted, hopefully. We switched to Brazil. Turns out Brazil is very different. Brazil, floodplain, right? So 6 months out of the year, I was working in the Tapajos River Basin. So 6 months out of the year, 3 months out of the year, things flood, right? So that pit privy that you put in and that water supply that you put in, they mix because it's all flooded. So what does it look like when you do structural equation modeling there? If water was dirty, kids got diarrhea. If homes had toilets or parents were educated, then filters were operated correctly. If filters were operated correctly or parents were educated, then kids get into, you're starting to see, it's not a whole lot of job for me as an environmental engineer to build water filters. I should have gone in there as a teacher and helped educate parents. But you nurses already knew that. You already knew education was important. That's why you're not out building water filters with us engineers all the time, right? But we'd love for you to build water filters, but it turns out we can help people get jobs, education, water filters. All of these things can contribute. Jobs, education, water filters. We're starting to hear things like conservation and technology and economic. Sounds like we might be heading that direction. Ken's going to like this. You go back to Guatemala, we look at if water got dirty, kids got diarrhea. If kids played on dirty floors, they didn't grow tall. Fomite. Water, toilets, and clean fluid influence but didn't control results in diarrhea. Oh, well, I guess that EED thing didn't work out. They weren't getting it from the water. They were actually getting it from playing on dirty floors. That's interesting because moms bundle kids a whole lot. You almost think about that as being like a contributor to stunting. It's kind of like bound feet in the Far East, right? So these kind of phenomena, they bind their kids. And so now we're thinking, okay, well, is it EED or is it binding? And is the binding actually good or bad? But that's the neat thing about structural equation modeling. You can ask those difficult questions about latent variables, things you know must be there, but you can't measure them. Went to Soweto, South Africa, right? Yeah, here's what's really clear there. The situation for boys and girls is entirely different. In Guatemala and Brazil, we didn't see a gender difference. South Africa, we saw a really strong gender difference. 5F diagram. Say, okay, well, if we can just work on water filters or hand washing. Well, turns out when you put that in a structural equation model, you go across different regions in Guatemala. So on the left is an SEM of the 5F diagram. On the right are regional differences in Guatemala. Different parts of the 5F diagram play a role in different parts of Guatemala. So a one-size-fits-all solution isn't going to work. Sorry, USAID. Sorry, WHO. You can't do one study, one time, in one place, and then extrapolate it to the whole country. But nurses already knew that. Because you think about patients and populations, and you scale up. Right? People that drive around in limos and have red carpets, they don't think about that as much. We've got a solution. Let's throw some money at it. We'll feel good. Politicians will stand up and talk about it. See, everybody got a water filter. $150 years ago, we did things that we would look back now and say, that's kind of goofy. We're doing things now that we're going to look at and think are kind of goofy 150 years from now. We're still doing this. We're still doing this, right? We get up here and we give our talks. This is what we're doing. And if we in humility can recognize that, we can actually make some pretty good progress. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do the things we're doing, but we should recognize when we beat each other up over, well, that's an evidence-based practice or that's a science-based decision. You know, I like khaki pants, not blue jeans. There's no science-based decision there. So let's think about what we're doing. How do we integrate these things together? What would be some models? We could look at the Eat Lancet model. Wouldn't it be nice if what you put on your plate saved the planet and caused you to have the proper weight? That'd be ideal. If only big government would come and tell me exactly what to eat. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Right? You don't get any anti-American than that, right? I mean, isn't that the whole reason we did this whole like leaving thing? I don't want somebody telling me what to put on my plate. How about other models that are out there? Well, we talk about the SDGs here in the middle, right? If you look at the SDGs, are they really that different than Henderson's nursing needs theory? The 14 ideas that Virginia Henderson said, and are those really that different than what Florence Nightingale said? And are the nursing needs theory really all that different from the 14 grand challenges that the National Academy of Engineering came out with? Breathe, carbon sequestration. Eat and drink, clean water. Bodily waste, nitrogen cycle. Posture, urban infrastructure. Sleep, informatics. Dress, fusion energy. Temperature, solar. Grooming, medicines. Avoid danger, prevent nuclear war. Communicate, cybersecurity. Worship, engineer the brain. Work, scientific tools. Play, virtual reality. Learn, personal. There's an awful lot of overlap between what engineers and nurses are interested in. Environmental engineers were much more simple. Here's our 5 goals. We're going to solve problems of food, energy, and water, and at their interface. We're going to get rid of climate change. We're going to have no waste. We're going to fix cities, and we're going to have informed decisions. See, we have very, very modest goals in environmental engineering. So here's the opportunity to be bold. What does that look like when a nurse and an engineer collaborate together to be bold? Ken and I have had an opportunity to write some papers. Go to Nursing Economics and take a look at some of these. There's 3 that we've written over the last kind of 12 to 18 months describing some things. We've got a column that we do, Nurse Leaders in Financial Literacy, Learning to Become CFO of Me, Mastering the Health Savings Account, Promoting Climate Change Resilience. Here's kind of a synopsis of those. We talked about how financial literacy is part of health literacy. All nurses must understand financial literacy for their patients and themselves. No brainer. You wouldn't not understand pharmacy because you say, oh, I'm a nurse. You wouldn't not understand nutrition because you say, I'm a nurse. Why would you say, I'm not going to worry about money because I'm a nurse? U.S. Health Savings Account as a tool to educate nurses about financial literacy. When you spend your health saving account in the United States to reimburse expenses for health care, you're robbing yourself of a 3-time tax benefit. When you let that money set until you retire and then you remodel portions of your home to make Americans with Disabilities Act kind of qualified, you get a 3 times tax benefit on that expenditure. Why would you ever spend that account early? Because you don't know any better. Why would your patients spend that account early? Because you didn't teach them. Americans' financial literacy is horrible. Finance, insurance, and bonds may be used to increase financial independence of community members and reduce demand for emergency. How many people here like to respond to emergency situations? There's a problem, there was COVID, I mean, you're nurses. Who here likes to respond and help take care of an emergency? Who here would think it would be awesome if people could take care of some of that stuff themselves? You know what stops them from taking care of some of that stuff themselves? They don't have enough money. Well, we've got money for it. I've got health insurance. I've got homeowners insurance. That's how I have money for my problems. A nurse doesn't come and take care of me when I have a problem with my home or my car. How come they have to do it all around the world all the time? Because we haven't gotten financial tools to people. It's part of poverty. They don't have access to the same kind of financial tools that we do. There's a reason why people are poor. We keep them that way. Care penalty, something I'm passionate about and just finished a paper on. I want to read just a little bit to you. The care penalty is a function of market dynamics, which tend to undervalue work that generates substantial, unpriced benefits for others. Sounds a lot like nursing. The care penalty, often observed in jobs characterized by high levels of intrinsic motivation, such as concern for human welfare. Sounds an awful lot like nursing. Environmental engineering is unique among all engineering disciplines in that it is the engineering discipline that as a whole serves the public welfare, health, and safety directly. That's what I do. It's why I get along so well with nurses. We're doing the same stuff. The similarities between the occupational descriptions of registered nurses and environmental engineers suggest that both professions share distinctive aspects of caring. So what's it look like in data? Here's two figures from this paper, and we'll look into them a little bit, but here's the bottom line. More women, less money. More women, less money. Environmental engineering, 43% of degrees, baccalaureate degrees in 2009 went to women. Mechanical engineering, 11.4. 2019, 52%. Now, we are not culturally diverse, ethnically diverse, but we're gender diverse, at least in environmental engineering. The most among all engineering subdisciplines. You're looking for people. When someone says engineer, think about it in your mind. You think, oh, that's the guy that made that thing, right? That's not environmental engineering. That'd be that woman who cares. That'd be an environmental engineer. A group you could clearly collaborate. Not that you couldn't collaborate with the guy who made things. You're STEM discipline. You could work with anybody. But I would love for you to come work with us in environmental engineering. We're working on the same stuff. And here's the deal. We get the same penalty that you have. Here's our salaries. $82,000 per year. Now, that sounds like, I know for some of you are going to be like, yeah, boo, $82,000 per year. All right, $82,000 a year. But look, if I was aerospace, $115,000. Chemical, $105,000. Civil, $85,000. Computer, $111,000. Electrical, $107,000. Industrial, $80,000. The lowest paid of all engineering disciplines, and it holds true for both men and women because it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. If you're an environmental engineer, you care. And if you care, you don't earn as much money. Sound similar? So what's our response? Rather than suggest that environmental engineers should become less caring, we propose that environmental engineers should be aware of this economic risk and seek to mitigate the care penalty in advantageous ways. Flip the tables. Life cycle principles, environmental full cost accounting, clearly demonstrate unique contributions that technically skilled commitments to human welfare can generate. Doesn't that sound an awful lot like things that they're calling for in nursing? You don't like who's at the table? Flip the table over, right? Nurses from bedsides to boards. We do the same thing for environmental engineering. Greater awareness of these issues could build on and strengthen growing public concern regarding environmental sustainability and prove critical to unlocking growth in the engineering workforce. In our case, in the US, to care for human and planetary health. So, what's the correct response for nursing to the care penalty? Because you suffer it as well. Maybe we should charge for our professional service. Maybe nursing shouldn't be part of the room charge. I mean, the physicians make a lot of money. Why shouldn't you? I mean, instead of saying, well, isn't it a shame that all these nurses are leaving their jobs and going to travel nursing? Forget it. Go to travel nursing. Let the system fix itself. Well, but we got to care for our people. Well, you're not going to make money because nobody's going to care for you. But that seems harsh, Dan. Welcome to economics. Welcome to economics. Can you be caring and strong at the same time? Absolutely. You already know how to do that. You're nurses. I love you, patient. Get out of the bed and walk across the room. You need to do this for your good. I need you to breathe deeply now because you're going to get pneumonia if you don't. You know how to be strong and caring at the same time. Do it for yourselves. Be strong and caring for yourself at the same time. Train nurses in leadership. Promote awareness and respect of nursing as the most trusted profession. I love nursing. I talk about nursing all the time, and I get a lot of, well, yeah, but if you like it so much, why don't you just go into nursing? Well, I would if you wouldn't be such gatekeepers to keep me out. If you'd stop just talking to other nurses about nursing, it'd be awesome. You're the most trusted. You're the single largest healthcare profession. You're awesome. Let us work with you. Work with us. That would be bold. That would be exciting. That would be sustainability and partnership. Bottom line, more of the same is probably going to give us more of the same. So it is time to change something. So I hope what I've described to you is what it means to be I-shaped, T-shaped, and V-shaped, to think about the unique and shared traits of nurses, and particularly environmental engineers, to critique the work of pioneers, guides, and translators, to think about what these support systems might look like, and in particular, to think about solving environmental determinants of health, to live within the constraints of planetary boundaries, and solve social determinants of health, to distribute resources equitably. Thanks for your attention.
So the man completes his honorary Irishness with a pretty good gift of the gab. So thank you for that talk. It's difficult to capture the words for that talk in a single sentence, but it is what it is, and I think I speak for everybody when I say that.
I did have an English friend call me a cheeky monkey, so apparently that does capture who I am.
It's a culture thing. We won't go there. All right, we have time gladly for a few questions, and we have some colleagues with roving microphones. So if anybody would have a question for Dan.
I'm looking down here at Ken to make sure he's not like grimacing too bad with like, oh, did I really suggest this guy?
I've had a smile from ear to ear in the last hour. You've just woken me up, no doubt about that. So my name's Joanne. I'm a public health nurse. I became a public health nurse probably in my mid-20s, having had no idea what it was when I was undertaking my 3-year nurse training. And when I look back about the curricula at the time and the way that we learnt, the way that we kind of learnt on the job, we had no idea about this. It was never, ever, ever shared with us. So that was the domain of the engineers or the medics or whoever else, but it was never the domain of us. But we've always known this. We may not have put this language to it, but we've always known it. And I I just think that, you know, I don't think we need to do very much. I think we've got everything we need. We just need to get on with it. So the curricula that we have, certainly in the UK, and, you know, and hopefully within Southern Ireland, the postgraduate curricula is that you can be a public health nurse. So you can do all of this, but it's not the norm. The norm is still acute, episodic care within facilities. And so we've got to work together to, you know, to move those boundaries into primary care, into community, and start looking at our worth. And I know that, you know, putting a value on nursing is very difficult. We can talk about the RN forecast study so that we know how many nurses we need, baccalaureate nurses per patient in a hospital. But how do you measure prevention? How do you measure the work that we do around water, diet, exercise, all of that? It's really hard. So, you know, that's certainly a work that we can be doing within Sigma with you, because kind of social return on investment is where we need to be. And there's about 3 papers on it. I can't find any more, but I don't know how to do it. But I know it needs to be done.
Well, let's work on it.
So let's do it. The problem is I keep saying yes to everything. Sorry.
I mean, if Ken will work with me, then pretty much, you know, anyone.
Thank you. Fantastic talk. Really enjoyed it, and you've just given us a huge array of facts and figures and understandings, and I suppose we're limited in what we can do at any one time. And if you had to prioritise it in the Irish context, in education or in research, these are the top 3 things that if you were in our shoes, you would prioritise, or in a European context, what would they be?
So honestly, my candid advice would be do what you're most passionate about. I am passionate about, you know, saving 200 million children from stunting. So that's what I work on. So I think, I mean, these are big, ambitious things that we're going to take on. So I think what we have to do is work what we're passionate on. And I would actually say that, unfortunately, sometimes, you know, whether it's the politicians or it's the reward systems, it actually nudges us out of what we're passionate about. Caring people will solve big problems if they actually migrate towards, well, I'm going to do it because this is what has to get done. You know, the 2 big ones that I have up here is that we're living outside of planetary bounds and we don't distribute resources equitably. So I love things like the sharing economy as a way to address the equitable sharing of resources. I think that's a really fun tool. And living within planetary bounds is, I think, is 1, awareness raising, but then 2, your personal choices. Because you can be a great example to others by the choices that you're making. So for example, if I'm thinking like, okay, I'm going to fly over, and so what's going to be the planetary impact? I won't necessarily go buy a carbon offset, but I will do things that I feel will give me that offset in my own choices. And then I'll educate other people about them. I'll say, well, you know, okay, so I walked instead of drive my car for a few extra, you know, for a week or 2 because I knew that would help offset some of what I did, or I cut a little bit of meat out of my diet because I knew that would offset some of what I did. So those would be my candid suggestions.
Hi, Dan. Great talk. I'm really interested in the solution. So I think you've articulated the problem pretty well. I'm a nurse and a midwife and a dean of research over 6 faculty. Okay, so if I could solve this interdisciplinary cross-silo work-in, I could retire tomorrow. So as academics and as a profession, first of all, we don't work well amongst ourselves. Can I just, and I think it's fair to say that. We create a little silo, a little bit of expertise for ourselves, and we don't like sharing that. So we don't do that very well. So how do we do that with another discipline? And can I say, having the macro view that I do in the university, we're not alone. Every discipline is exactly the same. So even engineers only like working with engineers of like-minded, specialist interests of themselves. Okay, so trying to get engineers to work with nurses and nurses to work with engineers, or trying to get nurses to work with technologists and technologists to work with nurses, is actually a very, very difficult thing to do. I've tried lots of interventions in our university. I encourage dual supervision. So if you've got a PhD, it can't be supervised by the same discipline. It must be split between 2 disciplines. I've tried to incentivize with money. So if we could crack this, if we could crack this, we could go a long way to solving a lot of world problems, particularly in health.
No, and I agree, and I appreciate your comment. It's very true. I think my like retort would be 200 years ago, the universities of the world didn't look like the universities today. It wasn't until places like Johns Hopkins in the States invented the idea of the modern research university that we've even had all these kind of like disciplinary side, right? Because just the Great Sanitary Awakening, right? I mean, so if you look back at the letters of Nightingale, you will find all kinds of correspondence with Chadwick. And yet I showed his picture and everybody in here was like, I don't know who that is. Her like biggest supporter, a politician that was like, stop paying attention to John Snow and start paying attention to Florence Nightingale. So we actually did this. And so I would say that part of the issue is, especially when you've got amalgamations and new universities, just blow it up. I mean, now that's the American in me, but just stop counting beans the way you've been counting beans, right? So, we worried about papers and impact factors. And so, things like altmetric is an example to push and say, okay, well, so how many retweet interactions did you get with what you did with your paper? As opposed to did other nerds in academia read and cite my paper? Who cares? I mean, seriously, let's get past ourselves, right? And then actually say, okay, now do we actually put something in practice? In the States, there's a called Boyer's model. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's got 4 pillars to it, and I'm happy to share offline. But it's about discovery research, but it's also about the science of teaching and learning, engagement, and integration. And it works on giving people, credit for all 4 of those pillars. And so there's a set of tools you can bring together to help give people credit for those sorts of things. And I would encourage that. I'm a big fan of it. And then part is we just have to have thick enough skin. So, I mean, I know a little bit of what it's like to be a nurse, because when I talk to engineers about like, hey, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, but if I say to my engineering colleagues, you know what, I'm a lifetime honorary member of Sigma, they'd be like, well, what's that? And I would explain, it's this 135,000, 600 chapter, but that's in nursing, right? To your point. Well, that's nursing. Well, where's your engineering credential? You notice on my slide, I have to have credentials like in 3 different spaces, because the people that inspect kitchens couldn't care less about engineering or nursing. The people who are in nursing don't care about engineering or kitchens, and the people in engineering don't know that there's anything else beside it. Everybody knows the definition of the extroverted engineer. It's the person that stares at your shoes instead of their own. Right? So, yeah, engineering's the worst of them when it comes to collaborating. So, we just have to do it. Just be an example. Isn't that kind of being bold?
Okay.
Kevin's going to grab the
well, not literally, I hasten to add. I'm sure like myself, but I know the good news is that Dan will be about for the few days. So, and no doubt we'll have an opportunity to talk. I can't think, I don't know many engineers, which is probably your point, and, but of the ones I do, I don't know any that would bring us as nurses to a humbleness to remember that the person is at the centre of what we're about. So I think it would be proper to conclude with asking our audience to thank Dan for all you do for nurses and nursing. So that has been a great honour for myself, and now I have the further honour of handing over to my So I'm going to hand over proceedings to Dr. Marie-Louise Liu King, who is going to bring us to our second session. And I wish you all an enjoyable remainder of the conference.